Our relationship is always me just like, come on, Dave, you know how good you are. And that he's shy and hates his voice. I was probably always his biggest cheerleader to let him know that his talent was real. I don't know if he listened to me.
Welcome back to Foos Files. It's Dan here, and we've got something really special for you for episode 2. We're joined by Barrett Jones, producer of the debut Foo Fighters album and a lifelong friend of Dave Grohl. So, we're going to hear what it was like to work with Dave all the way back in his teenage years with Freak Baby and Dane Bramage through to Nirvana and the first Foos record in the 1990s, and then years later when Barrett was involved in Sonic Highways and the Play Project in 2018 too. So there's lots to unpack in just under an hour. Barrett had some really great stories, particularly from Dave's Nirvana years that certainly I'd never heard. So hope you enjoy them too. Let's get straight to it then. Barrett Jones speaking to the Foos Files podcast all the way from the famous Laundry Room Studios in Seattle.
Well, in 85, I sort of went to the next level with my recording. We're just recording myself to actually recording other bands. And I sort of made this makeshift studio in my parents' house where the control room was in our laundry room. And my bedroom was like right next to that. And that's what I used for the live space. And I think like probably the third band that ever came in to record was this band called Freak Baby. And they were like adjacent to friends of mine in a band called the singer was the younger brother of a friend of mine. And they were all like 15, 14 and stuff. And that had the guitar player was Dave Grohl at 14. They were a hardcore punk band, and not that great. A little bit, just not that great. The drummer, this guy Dave Smith, who's a good friend of mine, he wasn't the best drummer at the time, and so anyway, we recorded like 6, 7, 8 songs or something in a day. And then probably 6 months later, they came back and they had changed their name to Mission Impossible. And Dave had switched to drums. And they were just like leaps and bounds better as a band. And like I remember just being completely blown away by how fast Dave could play and how hard he hit. And he's, 14, 15-year-old kid who was just the most high energy, bouncing off walls guy I've ever met. And we did like, 15 songs in a day or something like that. All the songs were like 30 seconds to a minute long or something. And then, over the years, we just became friends. And his next band was this band called Dane Bramage that rehearsed in the group house that I had moved into, like right after I moved out of my parents' house. So I had a group house with 5 friends. And one of my roommates, Ruben Radding, started this band, Dane Bramage, and it was Dave on drums and Dave Smith, that the other person that was in Freak Baby in the beginning. It was a 3-piece, and they were very like kind of post-punk, really cool stuff, really riffy and good melodies, and they were a great band.
What strikes me about that is that, we hadn't heard of Dave Grohl by this point, but for years people knew him as Dave Grohl, the drummer in Nirvana, and then Dave Grohl, the songwriter, and Dave Grohl, the frontman, emerge. But you kind of saw this well-rounded, if you can call him that, well-rounded musician forming from really young, because he's on guitar 1 minute, then he comes back and he's this like powerhouse of a drummer, like as a teenager even.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I vaguely remember the guitar playing in the first band. I don't remember being like blown away by any of that, but once he was on drums at 15, he pretty much was a drummer until I recorded like his first song, and then I realized what an amazing songwriter and guitar player he was. But that wouldn't have been till more of the late 80s, like 89, 88, 89.
So it's when he came back and when he came in and he'd switched to drums and first really started hammering those drums, you just went, wow.
Oh yeah, no, I mean he was his tempo at that point wasn't that great, but he was so precise and his foot was so heavy. Like I'd never seen another drummer like that. It was always amazing to watch him drum. He was just a force to be reckoned with.
And as you say, it kind of kicked off a long-standing professional and personal relationship that you've had with Dave. What is it about your partnership, if you can call it that clicked? Is there something about you kind of bring out the best in each other, or?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we were good. I mean, we were best friends for a little while there before, he blew up to this amazing thing, and, he's got busy and stuff, but we were very similar, grew up in a similar background. We had the same friend group, and we had our shared love of music. So, after Dane Bramage, he joined that band Scream, which, at 17, he started touring the world. He dropped out of high school and then started touring the world. And then, in between Scream tours, he and I and another friend of mine, Stafford, started a band. And it was mostly a sort of a recording project, but it was all my songs. And that's when he, like, one day came to me and said, I've got this song, can I record it? And he played everything on it, and that was God's Look Down. This is probably around 1989. And, he did the entire song all by himself in an hour, everything first take. And it was like the best song I'd ever fucking heard. And I was like, you motherfucker, how did you do that? I mean, he learned from me that you could play everything, because I had been doing that for a long time and, not doing it as well as he could. But Dave has this special talent that he doesn't think of all the possibilities or all the different things that something could do. He makes a choice of how a riff should go, how a drum beat should go, how a bass line should go, and then does it. He's very good at, doing that. He's never like, oh, maybe I should have done it this way, or maybe I should change this little thing. And he just knows exactly how it should go. And that's a very rare trait.
I think that, yeah, there's a theme, isn't there? Because we're going to talk about the Foo Fighters album shortly, and which was kind of done in a week, and you've just talked about songs that you've knocked together in an hour, and there's a theme that's kind of working at pace, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, well, and that's the reason we could do that record it was actually 5 days. The reason we could do that is because of all the work we had already done. Like, more than, I think, 90% of that record he'd already recorded with me on my 8-track in that same manner. So he already knew the songs. We knew, we had a routine of recording that was, and it was almost like a game to him. I would go in, I would set up all the sounds, get everything going. That would take I think it took like 2 or 3 hours at the studio, which is pretty fast. And then once everything's set up, he just goes and plays a drum track, comes into the control room, lays down a couple guitar tracks, puts a bass track down, maybe a guitar lead, and then moves on to the next song. And then the last 2 days was all vocals, and a rough mix.
You sort of mentioned the bond that you had, and a lot of that was that shared love of music, and there was the hardcore scene and everything. But what kind of stuff did you musically did you bond over? Because you hear about it, Dave talk about music, and he's an encyclopedia, isn't he? You know, he'll talk about the Beatles, and then he's onto the Bee Gees, and then he's onto AC/DC, and he's an absolute encyclopedia.
Oh, yeah.
So what kind of stuff did you bond over?
Musically?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all roads lead to Zeppelin. Basically, Dave and I think we'd both agree that Bonham is the ultimate drummer. And this actually all stems to, this is funny because like in around 1983 or something, I was the first of my friend group to have a CD player. I bought a CD player, and my very first CD was Houses of the Holy. And we would all get really high and listen to this on full volume out of my PA speakers in my house. And we were all just completely blown away by how good it sounded. And I remember Dave being there for that and agreeing, and, and while he and a lot of my friends were all kind of in the punk rock scene in DC, I mean, DC was dominated by the Discord scene. I personally was much more new wave, and I was more into bands like the Stranglers and Psychedelic Furs and Gang of Four, and not quite as angry. I just didn't have that anger in me. But the reason that Dave and I and all my friends were liked very diverse music is of the era. I think, we were preteens in the 70s when, AM rock was big. And that, I always think that anybody whose formative music years, but preteen years is when kids really pick up on music and it sticks with them. It's whatever, at least that back then, whatever you heard on the radio. And that was like AM rock and disco. That's why we all have that basis of that kind of music.
Well, just wanted to go back a couple of steps to the whole chronology, and you mentioned Scream, and there's this whole well-told story that Kurt and Chris came to a Scream show. Nirvana are then suddenly looking for a drummer. The stars align because Dave becomes available. He joins the band, and then at some point you're moving to Seattle to be his drum tech, right? Which is pretty huge.
Correct. I mean, I wasn't, I don't know if it was ever specifically because I was going to be a drum tech. I mean, it's funny because when he moved there and when he joined Nirvana, I had never heard of Nirvana. I didn't know who they were.
Yeah, they'd only done Bleach at that point, and it's only done about 30,000 copies or something, so...
Yeah, they'd only done Bleach, and, I think I'd maybe heard one Soundgarden song in a club before that or something like that, but I didn't really know much about him. And anyway, as I said before, we were doing a band of my songs in DC, and when he told me about breaking up, Scream breaking up, I was initially like, oh, that's cool, you can come back and we can do this band. And he said, well, no, my friend Buzz told me about this band up in Seattle, and I'm going to go up there, and they're shopping major labels right now, and I'm going to, blow them away and join the band, basically, is what he said. But anyway, so he moves up there, and we have this sort of, I don't know if you ever heard of a Pixel Vision. Pixel Vision was this Fisher Price video recorder that uses cassettes. It was made for kids. And we both, well, Kurt had one and I had one. So Dave would send me these like tapes back and forth as correspondence. And when he was he was living with Kurt in Olympia when he first moved there in early 90 or late 90 or something like that. And he was really depressed because it was just, Seattle's in the middle of the winter is dark and dismal, and, he's sleeping on a couch. Kurt's kind of a slob. They're staying up till 5, 6 in the morning every day, just eating 7-Eleven food and doing what you do. So he was bummed. And that's when he was like, dude, you need to move out here. And I at that point, I was like, I can't do that. I don't know, that's crazy. And it just happened that a few months later, the neighbors where I was living had called the county on me because they found out I had a recording studio. And the landlady then showed up one night and freaked out and gave us 30 days to get out. So I was basically home. I was homeless all of a sudden, like just a few months later. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm moving to Seattle.
So it was more out of necessity, because he wasn't really selling it to you there, was he? Come over where they were staying up eating junk food, slobbing around. There's not much. It's wet and dismal.
Yeah. No, but he was saying the music scene up here is amazing, and I was at that point sort of frustrated with the DC music scene because I just didn't fit the punk rock scene, which at that point literally like had a very firm hold over the DC scene. So that was it. I moved out there because I heard, he told me how great the music scene was out there. And I'm trying to remember the timing of this. At some point I flew out to LA while they were recording Nevermind. I spent a week with them in their little apartment and going to the studio with them every day just to soak it in. And that was, I'm trying to remember when that was recorded. So that was before I moved out there, obviously. But I can't remember if it was before I decided to move to Seattle or not. But anyway, I just remember being in the studio and being so completely blown away by how good it was, how good that record was. I actually made a bet with Kurt. I mean, we didn't bet anything, but I told him that you're going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone within a year of this coming out. And they all kind of laughed at me, but it definitely happened.
So you weren't specifically going to be the drum tech then? It was just a case of Dave was like, you got to come out here, and then what happens like next then?
Well, we were always going to get a house together. So I moved out there. I actually spent the first month living in my van in front of Chris Novoselic's apartment in Tacoma, which is half an hour from Seattle. And every day I would drive up to Seattle, trying to find a house to live in and to rent. And it took like a month, but we finally found one. And then I moved out with a girlfriend, and Dave moved in with us. And then, so I got there in July, and they were on tour, I guess. And the first tour I did with them was at the end of the year, in December to New Year's. And I did actually monitors and drums, which was the only time that happened. And then I just went straight to drums.
Did you do all the big ones, like obviously MTV Unplugged's so famous now, and then
yep.
the one over here in the UK that's Stuff of Legends, the Reading Festival in 1992.
Yep, I was there. That's still to this day, I think, one of the most intense, great shows I've ever seen. It really was magical. That night was truly magical. I mean, I was getting shivers that whole night, and I was on stage, so I was sitting right next to Dave. But just the vibes I was getting from the audience was insane. and they played great. They really pulled it together that night.
So there's all this sort of craziness going on with Nirvana, but Dave's plugging away on his own stuff. The thing that strikes me, I think, is because everybody knew him first and foremost as the drummer in Nirvana, there's this kind of perception that he was a drummer who out of nowhere kind of had these amazing songs, but the reality is he was just sort of perpetually writing songs.
Oh yeah, he was writing nonstop, and then literally every time. And we did not tour. There was not a lot of touring going on in between 92 and 93. There really wasn't. I mean, that was an issue with me because I had to be at their beck and call, but I couldn't really get a real job because I never knew when we were going anywhere. So it's kind of a struggle, but no, literally, like when we were at home, we would just be recording stuff all the time. So, whether it was my songs or his songs, or, we did the King Buzzo record, which was just me, Dave, and Buzz. I recorded those 3 Nirvana tracks during that period. And this house that we had together in West Seattle was not, I could not do it as a real studio because the basement where I had everything was just not set up for it. And that just really 6-foot ceilings and no separation. It just wasn't conducive to actually doing a studio. But he was writing nonstop. Like Marigold was written when he was still living with Kurt in Olympia. So before Nevermind came out. And I recorded that. I can't remember if I might have recorded that before I even moved out to Seattle. There's 40 different songs that are pre-first Foo Fighters records of his that I recorded.
Yeah, I love the bit in the bits in Sonic Highways, which we'll talk about in a bit, where you're going through the sort of the bits that didn't make it, and he's putting his hand over his face, and it's just kind of you going,
Well, it's funny. His bashfulness is interesting. I mean, it's fine, but he never sees how good he is, I guess.
Yeah, there's that one. Is it the hooker song? And he's really covering his face, going, "Oh man," and it's got that kind of Beastie Boys sort of vibe to it, I thought. And but yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just us, getting stoned and having fun. We just he was like, yeah, let's pretend to be all these different people.
So you're living together, but there's literally no off button, I guess, because other people they'll chill and watch TV and do whatever, but you're cutting demos basically.
Yeah, I mean that's my life. I'm in the studio every day, whether I need to be or not.
And I think from Dave's point of view, you said again in Sonic Highways that it's like he's got a muscle that he's constantly got to exercise, but I suppose that's the same for you, which from what you've just said. So
yeah, I mean, Dave is more prolific than I am, but he really likes to work. He likes to make music.
So going forward then, we all know about the tragic end to Nirvana. Dave was dealing with that. There comes the point where we're getting back to writing and recording. It's his catharsis, if you like. And then you talked about there's kind of 40 songs that were in and around that pre-Foo Fighters period. When was the first notion of he's getting back on the horse, so to speak, and there's the first signs of this is going to be a proper, fully formed album?
I mean, basically, I can't remember the exact time. It was 6-7 months later. He called me up and said, all right, this is what I want to do. I want to go into Bob Lang's, which is that studio that was near his house that he bought up in North Seattle in Shoreline. And I want you and me to go in there and record all these songs on the big 24 track. So we were basically re-recording everything we'd done. I think there was maybe 2 songs that he hadn't recorded yet. And, that was like the second time I'd ever been in a 24-track studio at that point.
And it looks a hell of a studio as well, Robert Lang Studios.
Oh, it's I love that place. I love it because it's so big and boomy. Like the drum sounds you can get in there are amazing. Ironically, I think that's one of the reasons Dave doesn't love that record, the way that record sounds, is because there's so much room in there. I'd still love to somehow get to do a mix myself of that. I've never had the track
of the first album,
but yeah, Dave has, for some reason, doesn't love the way that record sounds, but everybody else, all the fans do. Most of the fans love that record the best, so something was right about it. I think it was just because of the vibe at the time, but there's a stark contrast between that and the color and the shape, sound-wise.
But I think you don't know what it's going to be. B, despite the fact that he's playing all the instruments, there is an element of, as most sort of artists do with their first record, you kind of want to get it to sound as close to a live band, I guess, as well, don't you? That's the route that most bands would take with their first record, and stuff just evolves, doesn't it? And I guess he's also still finding his voice as a recording artist at that point. So
yeah, totally. He played everything on there, so that's besides the fact that we did it in 5 days, he's playing everything, and it still sounds like a real band. So
that is the big takeaway from it for me, that if you played it to someone that didn't know who it was, they would think it was a band.
No, yeah, totally. That's exactly it.
How was he going into that role of? I know he's played everything and he's recorded and he's written, but he's kind of putting himself out there now as a vocalist.
Oh yeah, no, he was really shy about it, and he's just like, I'm just gonna make this little demo, even though it's funny, our relationship is always me just like, come on, Dave, you know how good you are, come on, you're like blah blah blah, and that he's like shy and hates his voice, and I was probably always his biggest cheerleader to let him know that his talent was real. I don't know if he listened to me or not, but
yeah. Can I pick out a few highlights from the album to talk about?
Sure.
This Is a Call, the opener. It's the first single. Can you remember why that ended up being the opener?
I can't remember why he picked. I think we actually even recorded that first. That was the newest track. I can't remember if we demoed that or not. That song was sort of his first song that he felt that he had sort of stepped up his game. Like, that song just really jumped out to both of us as just being a real, like, this is a hit. No, it's really good. I mean, it's funny. I was just thinking, if a band came in and brought that to me now, I would probably edit it down a little bit, because it's some of the parts I think will go on a little too long, which is weird to say. I've gotten in my years of producing bands, like, trying to edit unnecessary parts out of things. Like, why do something 4 times when you can do it 2 and make the same statement?
Concise.
But yes.
So you then got I'll Stick Around and Big Me, so it's a big start, because they're like 3 of the 4 singles right at the start of the album. You often hear about classic, like, artist producer conversations about singles, and producer says this, artist says, no, I don't agree, I want this. Was that ever a thing with you and Dave? Did you talk about, well, this could be played on the radio?
No. No, never. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure as I said, at that point when we were recording it, there wasn't even a possibility of a record deal or anything. He hadn't started that process yet. So we were done recording before anything started getting shopped. I mean, it was just, as he said, he put out 100 tapes, or he made 100 tapes and handed them out to friends. But of course, some of those friends were labels and stuff like that. And he already had his whole team from Nirvana, his manager and his lawyers and his accountants, and they all came up with the plan, basically. And that's how Roswell Records got started. So since he paid for everything, the masters are his, so all he had to do was a licensing and promotion deal, which is what he had ended up doing with Capitol, I think.
Even so, privately though, as a producer, where any artist that you cut records with, you must have moments where you go, yeah, that's going to be on the radio.
I do, definitely. Not that it always happens, and of course the radio has been dead for a long time, so there's been enough records that I've done where I really believed it would be huge and it just didn't happen. And for whatever reason, labels messed up or bands messed up, or they got dropped before it even came.
The industry at play.
The industry.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
As I say, I'm not going to drag you through every single song on the album, but I've got to mention Alone and Easy Target, because it's got that kind of Nirvana-esque, quiet, loud, very loud thing going on. And then there's the well-told story, obviously, that Kurt heard the demo and then gave Dave this big kiss of approval.
Right. Yeah, and I hadn't heard that story until he told me, which is interesting. But Alone and Easy Target, we recorded a bunch of times, so it's funny. I'm sure your perspective is totally different than mine, because it was just another song that I thought was really good. I mean, I guess the riffs and the screams are what I always like about that stuff.
Good grief! I'm a bit of a guitar nerd, so I love listening out for the guitar sound. So far in the album, you've not got a lot of bells and whistles. It's quite straight up rock distortion, and then Good Grief comes on, and you're like, oh, there's a riff, and there's a bit of possibly like a bit of modulation or whatever going on with the guitar.
Shit, I'm gonna think about what that is now. There's the little sort of clean guitar thing with the two distorteds on either side.
Oh, so there's no that's just completely dry, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it might just be actual natural sort of phasing between the stereo guitars. Because he's just sort of its own natural modulation, because there's sort of lots of open ringy strings, and that will naturally, just like, especially when you have two of them that he's playing, two different versions on the same time, they're both like going in and out warbling on their own.
Okay, there you go. That's taught me what I thought I knew about guitar effects then. So, and then it goes on. You've got Floaty, you've got Weenie Beanie, you've got Oh George. So the album kind of ebbs and flows from there, because Floaty's got this little bit of, it's like a shoegazy start to it. Weenie Beanie's probably the most brutal track on the album, and then Oh George has got that great guitar solo that is kind of like George Harrison-esque.
Yeah, the slide that I think we played with I don't even know if I had a real slide. It might have been like a pen or something like that. It's funny. My favorite tracks on the whole record are Exhausted and Ecstatic.
Yeah, Ecstatic's that's the only one that's got anybody else playing on it, isn't it? Right? Is it Greg?
Yeah, but I could not for the life of me pick out, tell you what that was. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure if it actually made it into the final mix.
Okay. But he was there at some point, and he laid something down.
Greg came in and was hanging out, and we threw a guitar. He played it was like a one-note thing, single string kind of thing, if I remember correctly.
just quickly for all the cows, that's a bit of an about turn, because it's suddenly like, oh, this is a bit
I know.
jazzy.
Dave was all about like cool chords and cool riffs and, obviously melodies, because he was a huge Beatles fan. I mean, For All the Cows and Big Me are similar enough, just because they're clean and sort of poppy. Of course, For All the Cows does break into the heaviness, so.
Exhausted, you mentioned as being one of your favourites, a really interesting closer. Why that then is one of your standouts?
I just loved the guitar wash on it. And it just, the vibe, the actual vibe of the song, it just, that song spoke to me more than the rest, I think. Just that's kind of my style of music more, I think,
than sort of the visceral in your face. Yeah. It's quite moody, and then it kind of starts riffing away, and then you kind of think it's going to bleed out, don't you, at one point, and then it comes back for a little bit more.
Yeah, the demo of that we did, I had, the guitar sound was just amazing. I had this broken amp that had died by the time we made the record, but so I never quite got that sound again. But still, it was cool guitar sound on there.
So, as you say, Dave's known for his humility, and as we also explained, he's exercising a muscle here, and you're his cheerleader, and you're going, you've cut this record, this is going to do really well. And I suppose you've got to bear in mind, he's not starting from scratch either, because of the Nirvana background, everything's in place, but you're going,
exactly,
come on, man, this is going to do really well, this record.
I knew it would be huge. I did know it would be huge. It had to have been, because everybody was, knew him. And the song, I knew how good the songs were. I mean, that's the reason why. It wasn't just like, it wasn't because he was just in Nirvana or whatever. I just knew how good the songs were.
I know you said about you'd love to get the chance to do a mix of it. Other than that, do you have like an overriding feeling about it 30 years on, or whatever it is?
I mean, I think it's, it's a good testament of what, 5 days we could do in 5 days. I don't think that record would have been the same if he had done it with somebody else, good or bad. I don't know. I mean, we did that in 5 days, and the color and shape took 8 months?
Yeah, it nearly killed him, didn't it? So
yeah, no, that was the tough. It's funny, I just this couple days ago, they did pre-production for color and shape at my studio, and I just transferred all the tapes to digital from the pre-production session for color and the shape. It's interesting. There were some songs in there that I didn't recognize. So,
is that just for want of a better word, like archiving purposes?
Yes, just archival. Yep.
It's one of those. There you go, kids. If you're young, you're in a band, and you're worried about your budget for studio time. This is what you can do in 5 days. So,
yeah. I mean, you just have to know what you're doing and just be able to do it. Not many people can do that. I can only think of a few, like Prince and Stevie Wonder, that can do stuff like that.
Moving on a little bit, there's a couple of other bits that I wanted to talk to you about, notable things that you've been involved with. We mentioned Sonic Highways, because obviously you feature quite heavily in the Seattle episode, which is just amazing. I mean, the whole project, the whole concept, the album's great. The docu-series was brilliant. It was just a brilliant way of making an album.
I know, that was a really cool project. And I actually play on that song, in the Seattle song, although I don't get any.
Subterranean, yeah.
Yeah, I play the Ebo part, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's another band or another musician that could have made a record and a film in that way, to be honest with you, just because of what scholars they are of music, as we sort of talked about previously. But you've kind of gone full circle, because you're back to Robert Lang.
Yeah, and obviously that's why Dave chose that place.
So tell us about why did you end up playing the EBow of all things?
I don't know. Dave just said, "Yeah, you put an Ebo part on this." I said, "Okay," and that was a lot of fun. It was the first time I got to be produced by Butch Vig, and he's a hard one to hard one to satisfy.
Is he really?
Oh yeah. He pushed me hard, which was good.
So are you, Dave, Pat, and Chris all playing on?
Yep. Yeah, and I got to perform that with them when they did the Sonic Highways tour in Seattle. I think there's a video of it on YouTube at the Showbox.
Bet that was a moment.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. And Barrett Jones. How's that, Barrett? It is what it is. Thank you, Barrett Jones.
So last but not least, another piece of music that I absolutely love, there's a connection to here, is Play. For those who don't know, it's a 23-minute instrumental that Dave put out in 2018. It's, by all intents and purposes, it's designed to be like an educational piece, but where you come in is you were involved in, is it the one and only live performance?
The one and only live performance, yes. Yeah, that was a blast. I mean, I had so much fun doing that, and I'd love to do it again whenever he wants. That was so much fun.
Do you want to tell us what the concert was?
Warren Haynes, who used to be in the Allman Brothers and has his own band. He has this show every Christmas in Asheville, North Carolina, where he's from. And it's a benefit concert, and it's held at the arena there. And it's usually sort of jam band kind of stuff. And he and Dave are friends. Dave has a great story about that, how they became friends. And it was because in the beginning of COVID, when Dave was trying to get his mother from Virginia to LA, and everything was shut down, he somehow was able to get his mother on a tour bus with Warren Haynes to get a ride out to LA. And they became fast friends after that. And he's an amazing musician, amazing guy, like a really great musician. And he just loves to, do covers and jam. And anyway, so Warren asked Dave to, if he wanted to do this thing. And Dave was like, yeah, I want to do this thing that I did live. And that's kind of like the perfect, vehicle for that.
It's 23 minutes, but you managed to stretch it to more like 33, right?
Yeah, we added some parts. We all sort of had, we extended things, and then I added one part. I was lucky enough to come up with a part that we could add in. I don't know. It was added long solos and stuff like that, so we could stretch it out.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lineup as well, because you're one of three guitarists.
Yeah, I mean, playing with with Alan Johannes and Jason Faulkner.
He's the Beck guy, right? Jason.
Yeah. He plays with Beck and lots of. I mean, he's kind of done hired gun stuff for a long time, and he has his own stuff that's really great. His own records. He's been around forever.
Chris Cheney, who's kind of played with everybody.
He's out with AC/DC right now. He's playing bass with AC/DC right now. Yeah, an amazing bass player. I mean, the lineup was insane. Drew Hester was playing percussion. He plays drums with Stevie Nicks.
And then there's the Greg Kirsten, who's another Foo Fighters producer. Yeah,
correct. He's a great guy too. Really great keyboard player and just a great producer.
So I dread to think how you went about learning this song to play live.
Well, and that was interesting. So there were like 3 guitar parts, but Dave didn't assign guitar parts to anybody. He was just like, I spent like a month learning all the parts. And, when we got there, we had like 2 days of rehearsals before we flew out. So basically we had 2 times to figure it out. And, we had a text chain going on with Alan and Jason, like, what part do you want? Who's doing what part? And those guys threw the hard parts at me, which was really annoying. But I think eventually some of them went back to Alan.
It's extraordinary to watch because there's all these twists and turns, and there's like several bits where you're really stepping on the gas and you're getting lost in it as you do when you're jamming, and then suddenly it kind of drops and it's like, right, we're finger picking now.
Oh, that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
That thing, and there was a discussion on that. It's like going to finger picking all of a sudden in a live situation. It's much easier in a studio where you're like setting it up and you can get the proper sound. Although he did it all in one take. All that stuff was done in one take. But it's easier in a studio than it is live to go to finger picking.
Yeah, and then there's this like psychedelic bit 8 or 9 minutes in, and then suddenly like a percussionist appears.
Oh, the spoon lady?
Yeah. At the front of the stage.
She was the local woman who played spoons, and that was fun.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, just go and watch the live version, but also the official version where you've got 6 or 7 Daves walking into the studio and playing every single instrument. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, that official version is amazing.
So that was Barrett Jones on the Foos Files podcast, and it was an absolute pleasure to hear his stories, not just about Dave and the Foo Fighters, but also a pretty remarkable career he's had himself as a musician and producer. Thank you for listening to the Foos Files podcast, and don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button on your favourite podcast app to ensure you never miss an episode. See you next time.